Hi, I'm Sam Boyk, and welcome to In the Air with Thunderstorm here on Comcast CET. Over the next half hour, we will take an inside look at one of the most exciting teams who hit the field on Broncos game day. While the Denver Broncos give fans great excitement, we are talking about a different team, the Thunderstorm skydiving team. Thunderstorm is truly a fan favorite here on game day. Their daredevil jumps with great precision and accuracy help set the mood for the fans to go crazy shortly before the Broncos take the field. But how did it all begin? Back in 2009, following feedback from you, the fans, the director of Game Day Entertainment, Teresa Shear, proved that she heard you. Fans said that skydivers were among their favorites. Message received loud and clear. So it was time to bring on the skydivers. Shear made it her mission to have skydivers at every game. Previously, the Broncos utilized military skydivers when they were available, but now it was time for an every game team. After some research, Shear discovered that Denver is a skydiving mecca. In came Mile High Skydiving, the largest and most reputable company in the state of Colorado. Based out of Loveland, they are a team of instructors that compete all around the world. And some are world champions in different categories of technical skydiving. Oh, and they happen to be huge Broncos fans. So behold, the birth of the Thunderstorm team.
I was kind of looking for something different to do in my life. I'd always wanted to go jump, and I went to my local drop zone back in 1999 outside of Tallahassee, Florida. Made my first tandem, and I really haven't stopped jumping since.
I came out and did my first jump here at Mile High Skydiving and fell in love with it immediately. Decided that this is what I wanted to do. So I was spending all my money skydiving, and when I ran out of money, they offered me a job so I could continue jumping, and got my ratings, got my instructor ratings, started working here, and yeah, the rest is history.
Kind of fell right into it, really. But what got me started into skydiving was I'd always wanted to do it since a teenager, but the timing wasn't right. And then all of a sudden one day a friend showed up and said that, hey, I just did a tandem. And I said, where did you do that tandem? I want to do that. And by the next weekend I was signed up not just for a tandem, but also the AFF course. I knew that this was going to be a lifelong thing and that skydiving was going to be a part of my journey for many, many years. And now it's 17 years later, still jumping, and it's one of my #1 passions. I love it.
In fact, I took that first call from the Broncos. They called us up and wanted to know if we could put a team together, and it was like a winter day and there wasn't anybody here, and the office girl gave me the phone and said, here, you talk to them. And so we put something together, and here we are today, so 8 years later.
In 2009 was our first season, and it was just an opportunity, to do something really unique and different that, we hadn't done before. We'd done some stadium jumps, but what the Broncos were looking for and what we were able to provide just was a really unique opportunity to bring something a little high speed and a little on the edge, but yet controlled, into an amazing venue.
I mean, I'd done some demo jumps before. We jumped into other stadiums and a lot of 4th of July celebrations, Memorial Day celebrations, but this was the show. This is like big time, and I was like, all right, finally made it.
It's oddly enough, I don't remember what the first game was. I do remember the first practice. In the first practice, everybody was coming into the stadium with a nice, slow, what we call like a box pattern into the stadium, really easy. And I remember Jimmy Tranter, who has a lot of jumps, who's on our team, did a 360-degree turn approach the first time he ever jumped into the stadium, while the rest of us were taking it very easy as we were coming in. But at that point, we knew that we could definitely, bring something really special and unique to the game.
Well, we knew this was very high profile. We knew that we'd get a lot of, airtime and things like that. So we were looking for the best of the best. And so we put together a team of people who were instructors, highly qualified canopy pilots, people who actually do it for competition, people that have been on the world team. for canopy piloting. So we took the best that we had in the area. So.
Thunderstorm was a team that I saw from afar for a while. So I was not on the original team of 7 members at the time. And I knew that I wanted to be a part of it. And I trained and practiced, and I made it known that I wanted to be on Thunderstorm. I said, I want to be there one day. And basically, just like coach saying, hey, get in the game, I got the opportunity to practice and try out for the team. And it's such an elite team that when you get to practice, you know that you have one chance and one chance only to do it right. And on practice day, I was nervous, but able to do it, landed perfectly in the stadium, and then had to do several more jumps over the practice period so that they knew that I would be ready for a full stadium game. So a lot of empty stadium practice jumps, and then there was the day where it said, okay, Kenyon's ready, coach put me in the game, and there it was, 70,000 people in the stadium and jumping in for the very first time and landing on the field. So the team had been about 3 years old before I started, and I've been on it for the last 4 seasons, and what a remarkable 4 seasons those have been.
Now that we have the history lesson on these skydiving experts, we venture to Loveland to check out what it's like to prepare to jump into a stadium with 76,000 orange-clad Broncos fans. Stay tuned. There is so much more ahead here on In the Air with Thunderstorm. Welcome back to In the Air with Thunderstorm. I'm your host, Sam Boyk. On game day, we all have our routines. We put on that favorite jersey, or we have to eat the same food we ate last Sunday because, of course, the Broncos won. Well, the Thunderstorm team goes through their own routines as well. Remember, they don't start here at the stadium. These brave souls take off in Loveland, 35 miles north of the stadium, and it's there at Mile High Skydiving where the day begins. Like the Broncos players, this team does their own preparation for game day. Most importantly, it starts with the equipment that allows the team to work their magic. We caught up with some of the members of the team to tell us all about it.
I start my prep a couple days ahead of time, just make sure everything's ready. My gear, thoroughly check my gear. I do the pack job for the jump that day to make sure it's exactly the way I want it. I don't leave anything, packed up overnight for these demonstration jumps. And but just make sure I have all my equipment ready. You never want to forget something on a jump.
To get ready for each game, we have to really have a full set of gear. Of course, that includes simple things like a jumpsuit and a helmet and even a GoPro on top of that, but also an altimeter that we wear on our wrists so we know what our altitudes are. And we also have audible altimeters in our helmets that chime and beep and let us know certain points at where we're at in terms of our altitudes.
It also depends on if we're going to jump things like pyrotechnics into the stadium. We have a pretty elaborate wiring system and switch system that we have to install on our gear as well too, and all those things are checked and rechecked before we put them on, and then after we put them all on our gear and so forth before we go.
But the system itself, the rig itself, everybody wears the same system and the same rig. We have different size canopies depending on weights. So for example, somebody smaller might jump a 97 square foot parachute, and then somebody larger all the way up to a 120 square feet parachute. And there's also the reserve in there, and that's in case something happens and we have to get rid of our first parachute, then we get to go to our second parachute. Fortunately for all the games that we've done for the Denver Broncos, everybody has landed on their main parachute, and that has been quite wonderful. The difference here between those parachutes, those canopies, and the other canopies that you see a lot of other games is we jump high performance canopies into these games. Partly because it's for the crowd and for the show of that high speed, but also because when there are the cable systems up, we have to be able to dive through the cables and then be able to go underneath them. And that's just something you cannot do with a larger canopy that you see other teams jump, maybe the 240, 265 square foot canopies that are out there. So that's the main difference between our canopies and our setups that you see with other teams that jump into other NFL games.
We have to pull permits for every jump to make sure that we've got the airspace. The planes have to be inspected. We have to have the team ready to go, both with attire and all their safety gear. And then we have to communicate internally with the NFL, with the broadcast partner, and with all of the stadium staff. So I work with Thunderstorm here at Mile High Skydiving to make sure that we have timing that's been approved by both the stadium folks as well as the FAA for a practice jump. We do at least one practice jump before every game. Sometimes we do multiple, depending on how long it's been since the last time they've jumped into the stadium. We want to make sure that every factor, both on the stadium side and on this, the skydiver side, has been discussed and handled.
So what we do is we start with getting together and doing some practice jumps. You know, we do practice jumps throughout the season, and we do jump together even in the off season as well too. So we have a pre-jump checklist that all of us do anyway, and that starts from making sure our gear is ready to go. We do an inspection of our rigs and or canopies while we're packing them and or when we put them on our bodies as well too. And then going over safety procedures in the aircraft, safety procedures for exit, and also safety procedures for landing, if need be as well. And we'll get up here and we'll all get out of the aircraft and simulate what we're going to do in the stadium itself. And that means planning our exits in order, grouping up together and flying in a very particular pattern, because at break-off time we there again get into order as well for how we're going to enter the stadium. So we create a simulation as best we can to simulate what that is going to look like.
For every practice jump and on game day, the entire playing surface has to be clear. So we can't have anyone or anything on the field within the sidelines. So anything on the playing surface has to be clear, no people, no cameras. If we do have a cable system where the national broadcast has brought in an aerial camera, we have to make sure that that camera is parked in the right location to give the jumpers the largest access point in the northwest corner of the stadium so that they can land safely and there's no issues. Besides the jumpers, there's additional staff both here at the drop zone and at the stadium. So at the drop zone, it's the pilots and all the safety technicians to get everything ready up here. But then at the stadium, there's actually 3 people, a minimum of 3 people. The first is up in the light rack, checking wind speeds at the top of the stadium to make sure that wind speeds up top are safe. Then we also have somebody stand at the 50 with streamers so that as the jumpers come in, they actually see the ground level speeds as well. So that streamer will show exactly how the wind's blowing and at what speeds. And then finally, Frank, who is our main contact with the skydiving crew, is there because he's kind of our last checklist point. So he's the one who's handling communication between the light rack, the plane, the pilot. Everything that needs to be coordinated is being double checked and triple checked by Frank to make sure everything is safe before he ever lets them out of that plane. Frank and I have kind of a very choreographed and rehearsed dance that we do on game day. So I go out several minutes before, start with Stampede and we start our whole pregame show, and Thunderstorm's about halfway through. So I have to give Frank about the 5-minute warning before we ever have them come close to jumping out of the plane. And then we have to make sure that on our end we're keeping to that time so that they don't have to back up or recircle, because then we're never going to hit our timing. So I'm giving him a 5-minute warning, a 3-minute warning, a 1-minute warning, and then a jump time. So we typically count down from 10 seconds and then we wait for them so that they're in place and they jump. And they're always on time, but I know between Frank and I that we'll typically hit that time pretty accurately.
Still more to come here on In the Air with Thunderstorm. We've heard all about the build-up and the prep. Next, we find out about go time. Brace yourselves, it's gonna be a wild ride. We've come to the part of the show that we've all been waiting for. These guys have their game faces on, and they are ready to go. I'm standing here in the control room at the stadium. It is here that the scoreboard crew gets the very first look at the Thunderstorm team just moments before the jump. You see, the first jumper wears a live wireless helmet cam, and the folks in this room get a bird's eye view from the plane, just as the Thunderstorm team soars into the air. Dressed in their custom-made Thunderbolt suits, these guys thrill fans as they jump into the stadium at speeds of 70 to 80 miles per hour before sliding across the field to the delight of everyone. Every jump is memorable, but we'll hear about one particular jump involving a Hall of Famer that was pretty special. So, without further ado, what do you say we take the plunge?
First in today is Justin Thornton.
I've been jumping a long time and I've done a lot of jumps. But even when we get in the aircraft and we're going down to the stadium, it's just a different level. And there's the technical aspect because it's a very technical jump. The planning that goes into it is also very technical as well too. So you feel some of that, but it is pure elation when you hear the crowd and when you're turning in and setting up and executing a nice landing into the stadium. There's just really not much like it. So I guess, just pure elation and joy and really good, intense feelings as you're coming in.
It's one of those things where when the crowd themselves gets there early, we know that when we jump out of the plane, we know how many people are tailgating, we know how many people are at the gates waiting to get in. They're like a bunch of ants just waiting to get in through the gates, and then we know how many people are in the stands. But during the playoffs, everybody is in their seat. They're ready, they're fired up, they're wearing their colors, and as soon as we exit, we can hear them. The crowd just roars, and so there we are under our canopies, and we're flying around in formation, and we can hear that energy of the crowd just getting louder and louder, especially as the very first jumper, Jimmy, when he makes that turn and comes into the stadium, just the crowd erupts, and then it goes quiet again, and then the next jumper flies in, and the crowd erupts. And I'm usually right around 5 or 6 jumper into the stadium, so I get this time and time and time again, and then be able to make that final turn into the stadium and just land on the field. It's just, the crowd is just, it's amazing. We do it for the fans.
We have a very set and determined plan for landing direction, depending on if we're all landing together, especially if we have the cable systems up. That's all they're going to pre-plan on exactly what direction we're going to go. Or if we're doing something like when we don't have the wires up, we like to do the opposing landings with us coming in on all 4 corners. All that is very pre-planned. And whenever you're setting up to execute that particular jump, you have checkpoints in the air. And depending on what direction I'm going to come in, I will look at a place over the stadium and I'll fly and make sure I'm at that particular point at a particular altitude. And when I'm at that checkpoint, then I know that I'm ready to go to the next one. And you're using a reference on the ground along with a wrist mount altimeter that allows you to put those 2 pieces together. So the answer is you have checkpoints on the ground and altitude checkpoints that you're flying to at each particular point to allow you to enter the stadium at the right altitude.
This really sets the stage to get people pumped and excited for the game that's in front of them. This really just sets the standard and gets people excited and off their seat and cheering.
Even when we got that first call, one of the first questions that we got was, could we take somebody tandem into the stadium? And I wasn't 100% sure we could. But we got special approval, and I was the lucky individual that got to take Shannon Sharpe in as a tandem for his induction into the Ring of Fame. And I have to say, that's probably been the highlight of my career. Of all the jumps I've done afterwards, whether it's in the Broncos Stadium or just here at work, that was the highlight by far. The day of, we actually did the jump. We were the last ones coming in. Nobody knew he was coming in. It was a big secret. And as we're coming over the lip of the stadium, they announced, and your final jumper today, David Billings, and your special guest, Shannon Sharpe. And the crowd just went crazy. And he turned back to me and he whispered, he goes, "Did you hear that?" And I go, "Dude, that's all for you." And he goes, "Wow."
The Thunderstorm team, not only are they a wonderful group of people, but they are a huge element in our game entertainment program, specifically during pregame. So without the Thunderstorm, I don't think we would have the exclamation point on our pregame show that we do have. I hear from fans every day, every season, that the reason they come into the stadium as early as they do is to see the Thunderstorm jump. It really is the highlight of our pregame show that kicks off every game day in the right way.
We feel very blessed and very gifted to be able to perform for the fans and do what we do for the Broncos. And we're very appreciative of the fact that we get to do that. So it's something that we really enjoy, and we appreciate all the opportunities that it also has given us as far as being a part of that as well.
That is so cool. Those guys are rock stars. They have become a tradition here in the Mile High City at Broncos games. The Denver Broncos are the only franchise in the NFL with their own team of jumpers. It is one of the most unique elements of the Denver Broncos Mile High game day experience. And, as we heard, one of the reasons why people keep coming back to witness it over and over. Well, we've reached the end of our show. Time really does fly when you're hanging in the air with Thunderstorm.